So we'll be going ahead and giving a talk on that tonight. Do we have any other sort of announcements? We'll start in prayer. So if everyone will go ahead and take your hands off. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, we thank you for this wonderful weather tonight. With it being Father's Day, we thank you for all of the fathers that we have out there. All of them are great spiritual leaders that we've had. We thank you for all of the speakers that we've gotten to have, and we thank you for Dr. Fracis, who's come out here to give us a talk. Our Father, who art in heaven,
hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
And I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Fracis here. All right.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Nick, thank you for asking me to be here. And
Absolutely.
I'm very grateful to talk to you all tonight. So one of the things that I always find amazing in life is like how many things have to come together to put me in any given moment. Like how many variables. So I am a professor at Wright State. I'm a psychologist. I've been practicing for almost 25 years. I still have a clinical practice where I work with individual couples and families. And I'm a sweater too, so I'll try to reduce my sweating. That breeze feels great. I never put that in my bio until tonight, so you're a first. Where was I? So yes, I'm a clinician. So one of the things that I find fascinating as an academic and as what I call a social scientist is to stop and pause and just reflect upon how many things have to come together for our lives to be coming together tonight. So how many variables had to happen for me to be talking to you at this place and time, right? And you could say, well, yes, our birth, or if I didn't get that, if Nick somehow didn't hear or know about me, or we could go back throughout all the time. And the reality is there's an infinite number of variables that bring us together today to share this space, to share this time. So I always find that amazing. So I'm going to keep track a little bit because I can be what we call tangential. I can go off on different paths, so I'll try to stay on track tonight. So like I said, I am a therapist. I have a clinical office in Troy, and I've been a full-time academic for 7 or 8 years. What I research and study is one of my biggest interests right now is kind of where we're at in time right now in 2021. We're going to call that modernity, modern times, being in modern times. And so, been really fascinated over the last several years in researching it on how we are at this intersection in humanity. Like we've generally been creeping along for thousands and thousands of years until the last 30, 40, 50 years. Many of you are a lot younger than me, but I remember when I was an undergrad in college, I got my first email account back in 1995, 1996. It was dial-up, and then slowly we go through that. Anyway, more on that later. So a lot of my research has been on us trying to figure out how do we interact effectively with modern times. All the cool things that it has to offer, but all the scary things and all the traps that are there along the way. So that kind of leads me to C.S. Lewis. And let me caveat this, I'm not a C.S. Lewis scholar. I'm not a classics scholar. I have been a relatively superficial fan of Lewis until I got the email from Nick several weeks ago. I was like, I know a little bit about Lewis. I read a lot of his quotes. I've appreciated him, but I've never dug into his stuff. And so this allowed me to do that. Now, whether that's providence or just a fluke, it's an opportunity for me to learn about that. So brief bio on Lewis, C.S. Lewis. Yes, he was Irish-born, but a British scholar. He worked at Oxford for years and was a professor and taught there. he was born around the late 1900s, and interesting fact, he died the same week, I think the day after John F. Kennedy did. JFK did in 1963. And so there's speculation that if he would have died without that distraction, that so many more people would have learned and understood him more and would have maybe even come to know him. That said, he had a huge influence. He was the author of the Narnia series, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, and that 7-part series, as well as a number of other fiction and nonfiction. So since Nick emailed me, I dove in. I finished reading Mere Christianity, which is one of his popular nonfiction books, and then The Great Divorce, which was just fascinating. So I'm going to be talking more about those two books a little bit. But another interesting thing about Lewis is that he was never Catholic. He never became Catholic. So there was an interesting thread online that said, if Lewis lived, how many more years would it take for him to have been Catholic? He was good friends with J.R.R. Tolkien, the author of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And so everyone says he would have got there, but he wasn't there yet. Okay, which is really interesting to me for a number of different reasons. Number one, it shows, and actually Dr. Peter Kreeft, the Catholic apologist, he said the best way to describe C.S. Lewis is he was the gateway drug to numerous Christians and Catholics. He was the introduction. He created the portal for people to learn about Christianity and understand Christianity from a different angle. It also shows that we don't have to learn exclusively from Catholics. That there are so many people out there that if we're open to that learning. Anyone know of Jordan Peterson? Heard of Jordan Peterson, the author? He's probably responsible more than anyone else in the development of my Catholic faith over the last decade. Since he first came on the scene maybe 7-8 years ago with his most popular book, 12 Rules for Life. So same concept. And I'm not comparing Peterson with Lewis, but he was the Jordan Peterson back in the 1940s and 50s and 60s. So we're allowed to learn from these diverse minds, these people who pause and challenge us and cause us to look at life a little different, and then ultimately to bring it back to God. So that's where the true power in C.S. Lewis comes from. So where do my interest in myself and C.S. Lewis merge? So like I said, I've been super fascinated with modern times, like with modernity, what it has to offer and all the pitfalls it has for us. And as I was pouring through C.S. Lewis's literature, I came across a site that has top quotes, 100 quotes from C.S. Lewis. So I just began a list. I have an attachment to my journal, and it's quotes. I've been collecting quotes for years. When I find a good one, I like to pause and think about it. And so I thought, in trying to formulate this talk, I thought, well, maybe I will go through a list of quotes and then try to apply those to things that hopefully I have some expertise in. So that led me to the title, C.S. Lewis, in his own words, Storied Wisdoms for Modern Times. And that keeps, in all my research and all my clinical work, it keeps bringing me back to two things. One is what I'm going to argue today through the words of C.S. Lewis, is that the simple things provide the most meaning and the most happiness, and that unfortunately modernity is pulling us away from that. It's bringing us into this other place that we have to be aware of, we have to be on guard, and we have to fight. So, 3 themes. There's 3 themes in Lewis's quotes tonight, and 3 themes that I want to talk about. The first one throughout the quotes is maintaining our intellectual passion, curiosity, and our intellectual humility. Okay, recognizing where we are in life, recognizing who we are, but pursuing greater and greater and greater depth. Thinking about things, pausing, stopping, thinking. The second one is finding peace and happiness. Where does happiness come from? Where does fulfillment come from? Where do we find that peace? Okay, because again, modernity is pulling us further away from that piece. And then lastly is exactly that. It's to help expose some of the dangers or some of the limitations to in modernity with technology, with all it has to offer. We're going to break that down a little bit too, okay, as I navigate my sweat beads. And stay hydrated. Okay, so if you're following along, well, lastly, I will be asking a lot of questions, okay? I think a lot of the quotes that I selected from C.S. Lewis, they should cause us to pause. And I'll throw these questions out, like, where do you find this? Or what do you think of this? They're more rhetorical questions, but I want you to think about those things. I want you to pause. If there is a question that you don't have the answer to, I want you to write it down, put a bookmark in your brain. Be like, how do I do that? Okay? So as we're going through that, I don't have the questions, and many of us don't, but keep searching for those questions. Okay, so if you do have a sheet, I just printed 20-some, there's a little bit more, is quote number 1. So Lewis is quoted as saying, God is no fonder of intellectual slackers than he is of any other slacker. Okay? God doesn't like intellectual slackers, is what Lewis is saying. It's easy for me up here because I can say, well, Lewis said this, I didn't. So God doesn't like intellectual slackers, just like he doesn't like slackers in any other parts of our lives. So being intellectually curious and stimulated and invested, engaging our brain, okay? Stopping, pausing, and thinking about things. The older I get, the more philosophical I get, the more I like to look at these deeper things. When I was in my 20s and 30s, it was an afterthought, but hopefully you are a little bit more mature than I was back in the day. So we must give ourselves opportunity to think. And that sounds weird, but I'm going to say this several times throughout this talk. What do we do when we're bored in 2021? So you got to run to Kroger, and you got a big cart full of groceries, and it's busy time, and you're 6 deep in the carts. What do you do when you're standing there? Do you pull out a book from C.S. Lewis and start reading? Do you take your notebook out and start writing down deep thoughts? What do we do? Grab the old holster, quick draw that phone. Check Twitter, check Instagram, check Fox News, check whatever your source of information is, right? We're not bored anymore because we have this constant source of distraction, right? So one of the questions I'm going to ask several times is, when we're engaged with technology, what are we not doing? Right? When we're engaged with technology, what are we not doing? So think about that within yourself. What am I not doing, or what could I be doing while I'm sitting there wasting 20 minutes, 2 hours? The average 18 to 24-year-old spends 9 hours screen time every day. The average. 9 hours screen time every day. Hopefully that's not you, but up to 9 hours. Crazy numbers. So that's my point. It's pulling us and taking us away. So what robs us of that opportunity to stop and think? Distractions, right? And there's more distractions now than there has ever been before in the history of our world. That's what's amazing. That's what I find so amazing, is that we have these devices and the technology to distract us from so many things. Okay? Quote number 2. Where you see and what you hear depends a great deal on where you're standing. Okay? Again, reflective questions. Where are we standing in our lives right now? Who are we standing there with? Where we stand determines what we hear and what we see. Okay, what are we looking at? We're looking at 2 o'clock at night and we're on our 4th Netflix binge show, and we're trying to justify we can watch just one more and still get up at 7 a.m. Where's that at? Now, that's not all bad. I'm going to bash technology and modernity. There is lots of good stuff there if we can moderate it, right? So it's not all bad. But where are we standing? Who are we talking to? where are we getting our information from? So where we stand determines what we hear and what we see. If we're only looking at maybe one news source, it's kind of corrupting the diversity. We're only talking to one group, if we're only reading one type of book, if we're only eating one flavor of ice cream, right? How vanilla is the world? So we have to diversify those things, and we have to look at what has my attention every day. Where's that attention going, and what is it doing? Never before have we lived in we call silos and bubbles. And that is not a fluke. I talked a few months ago to some of you. I see some similar faces. But I talked a lot about, it was closer to the election. And I talked about how this last election cycle was one of the worst as far as my team versus your team, right? You're either A or you're B. You either like this guy and you hate the other guy, or you hate the other guy and you like your guy, right? That's not just happenstance. I mean, yes, the personalities of the people involved in the election were variables, but that's what the news tries to get us to do. It feeds into its audience. It tells its audience exactly what it wants to hear, and it customizes the headlines so it sucks you into that world. We're in, as we continue to be sucked into more and more of this connection with technology, which, by the way, what has COVID did to our relationship with technology as a society? Has it distanced itself from society? Well, we had to become that much more symbiotic in that, right? Did anybody work at home? You do exclusively Zoom calls, right? COVID strengthened that relationship with us exponentially, right? And one of the subtones that I just want you to think about, because you never know, right? We can speculate. But when you try to pause and think and open your eyes to what diabolical forces, what evil. If I was the devil, my wife and kids say that I am sometimes, but if I really was, and I looked at technology and I looked at the internet, I looked at the politics, and I would do exactly what's happening in modern world right now. I would say, what's the best way to create havoc among a population? Divide them up, right? We're more divided than ever. Last 3 election cycles, what the election is like 47, 53, 49, 49, 51, 50, 50. Divide, turn them against each other, and then do a lot of the other things I'm going to talk about. Okay, so we live in these silos, and it feeds anger and hatred. Okay? So what if, where you stand determines what you see and what you hear. What if we looked at C.S. Lewis 50 years ago? What if we looked at Jordan Peterson or whoever else you liked, and we said, oh, they're not Catholic. I'm not interested in what they have to say. We can miss from the profound wisdom that goes along with that. I think it's quote number 3. True humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking of yourself less. Again, I'm going to bring this back to 2021. But what he's talking about there is humility. Don't think any less of yourself. He's not saying feel worthless. If anything, the more we think of ourselves, the more as far as quantitatively, the more often we think of ourselves, the less we think of ourselves. The more posts we put on Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram, the more times we post pictures and try to celebrate ourselves on Facebook. No knock on all the people who love posting on Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat or, am I missing any of them? TikTok. Usually the less we feel about ourselves, right? How is that? Because we don't have to think less of ourselves to think less of ourselves. Lewis is talking about thinking less of yourself as significant, as important, as all-knowing, being egocentric. Actually, and we know this, I know this in my practice, in my clinical work, the sickest, I guess you could say, the most pathological of clients that I treat are usually the most narcissistic and arrogant, especially a whole class of disorders called personality disorders. And one personality disorder is called narcissistic personality disorder. And when you truly see a narcissist, that's all they do. All they can do is think about them. Social media knows that too. So one of the things that social media and technology does is that it hijacks parts of our brain. Hijacks parts of our brain that are there and have existed forever to try to get our basic needs met. Right? So hey, it's good to feel good about yourself and get the affection and love of someone else. That's our primitive brain, what I call our lizard brain. Our lizard brain said, yes, affection's good. Life is good. We want people to like us. We want that affirmation. But technology, modernity, allows us to do it exponentially. There's no limit. Hey, if one picture on Instagram gives me 25 likes, what if 1,000 pictures on Snapchat give me 25,000 likes? I feel that much better about myself. To what end, though? Where are we going with that? When does it end? Right? You all have been accused of the me culture, right? It's the me culture. What's in it for me? How can I benefit from this? Lewis is saying, no, that's not where fulfillment is going to come from. We have to transcend that. Where are we at? Maybe 4? I don't have mine numbered, but as long as you are proud, you cannot know God. A proud man is always looking down on things and people. And of course, as long as you are looking down, you cannot see something that is above you. Something very metaphorical here. Where are we looking when we're at our phone or on our computer? We hold it up here like this, unless we're laying in bed. No, we're looking down. When I read that, I was like, oh, that's cool when we look down. But then I was thinking, figuratively, literally, when we're looking down, we cannot see something that's above us. So there's been studies in some of the Asian countries, I think it's Taiwan, that has even significantly more use of technology than we do. And there's slowly over the last 2 generations, there's a slow curvature in some of the bones in the back of their neck. Okay? And it's evolution saying, I'm going to make it easier to do what you're asking me to do. Right? So over the course of thousands of years, we were able to do all kinds of things because we needed to hunt and gather and industry and all that kind of stuff. And Mother Nature said, I'll make that easier. Now these bones are starting to curve in the back of our neck. They call it cervical horn or something in the back of our neck, because what we're asking our body to do is look at our phone. Sit over the computer. I got a poster in my office at Wright State that says, it has a picture of us evolving through the years. And so it's agriculture and then industry and then several steps in between. And then it has a picture of us hunched over our computer plugging away. And the heading says, somewhere something went terribly wrong. Because it did. And it continues to go terribly wrong. Okay? So, Jordan Peterson, bringing him up again, he has in his new book, he has one of his new rules that says, imagine who you could be and then aim single-mindedly at it. So when we look up, when we set that aim, when we move beyond the things that distract us, technology in many ways, that's where we're going to go. And that's also, C.S. Lewis is saying, that's where we find God, by looking beyond that. So metaphorical and very symbolic. Okay, so some other quotes that focus a little bit more, I want to stay somewhat on time, that talk more about happiness and peace. And there's some nuggets in here. So I think it's, 6 maybe? If we find ourselves with a desire that nothing in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we were made for another world. Okay? Is modernity and technology, is it trying to convince us that true happiness and satisfaction and peace comes from something beyond this world? No. Look at Amazon. Look at shopping. Look at social media. Look at gambling. Look at pornography. All these things that said This is where you find satisfaction. This is where you find happiness. This gadget, this new purchase. You can research it, you can buy it, you can click. And then what happens? You start thinking, ooh, it's supposed to be here 2 days. Okay, tomorrow, I got 1 more day. You're coming home. I wonder if that's going to be in the porch. It's going to be in the mailbox, right? You get that dopamine, that adrenaline, open it up. Great, awesome. Sometimes it's life-changing. Probably won't be. Other times you sit it down and you forget it. You get back online and you start looking for something else, right? So it brings up a key distinction. Technology, modern times want us try to convince us that it's this stuff that can give us that achievement. Like if we achieve something, if I achieve that new purchase from Amazon, if I make this much money, if I get that new job, if I get that relationship that I want, that's where happiness comes from. That's not fulfillment. There's a huge difference between achievement and fulfillment. Fulfillment doesn't come through some sort of physical benefit or physical acquisition. Okay, it comes from deeper and much more profound places. Okay, so, I don't know what, I've lost count, but God can't give us peace and happiness apart from himself because there is no such thing. So there's no peace and no happiness aside from God. Even if we say however you want to define God, from divinity, from transcendence, there's no peace and happiness from anywhere else, right? So where do we search for it? If I were to give you, how many's here maybe? 60, 50? If I were to each give you one piece of paper and say, where do you find happiness? Okay, I would hope many of you would say God, being this group. I hope there would. But my guess is, if it was any other group, or if I said, okay, you can't say God, where do you find happiness? There would be 60 different answers. We all have different places where we find happiness. We have to find that ourselves, right? So many times, every now and then, not so many times, so many times over the years, but every now and then I'll get a client who's very philosophical, who has an emptiness that can't be filled, and often brings up the question, why? What is the purpose of life? Why are we here? And that's a tough question, right? Because in my secular practice, I can't say, well, here's what God says, or here's what the Bible says, or here's what the Catholic Church says. I have to go with them on that journey to try to define happiness for themselves. It ultimately leads back to the same place, right? A deeper level of fulfillment. But what I don't do is, hey, pull out your tablet or your phone and let's get on Amazon, right? Do you have an Instagram account? Can you start posting pictures of you working out? That's not what I do, right? Because I know that that's not where happiness is going to come from. Human history is the long, terrible story of man trying to find something other than God that will make him happy. Throughout all of history, human history is a long time, right? The anatomically modern human being is about 350,000 years old. So throughout all time, we've always been searching for something to make us happy, other than with God. Okay? And then now, again, where do we find ourselves in historical times right now? We find ourselves in historical times with never before seen options that tries to convince us this is where happiness is. Right? It's right here. It's this political affiliation. It's this possession. It's this number of hearts or likes or whatever it is that you're looking for. So, one of those rhetorical questions. What robs us from happiness? What makes us unhappy? What makes us empty? Okay? Deep, 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 profound questions. And in many ways, and much of my clinical work, that's the ultimate question, especially if you're treating anxiety and depression and general malaise or what we call dysthymia, low-grade depression. So we have to search. We start on a detective search, and we try to dig through the stuff, and we try to figure out where is your unhappiness coming from. Now, sometimes that gets all the way back to childhood. It goes back to what we call ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. We go through crappy things in our childhood. Okay, we get messages. So over the last several years, I've been very I've been super interested in what's called narrative therapy or life scripts. And I'm believing in it more and more, is that earlier on in life, we write these scripts about our life. And we're the author, and we say, okay, this is the character, this is me. And if we base that on a lot of bad things that happen, then we write that character in a bad life for the rest of the story. Okay? And so we dig in, and we try to find the origin of that, and we try to transcend that trauma to redefine how they feel about themselves. No, you are not what happened to you when you were 12. You are not what happened to you as a freshman when you were bullied. You're no longer that person. And one of the elements of transcending that misery, that unhappiness, is finding God, finding divinity, finding that wholeness that only comes there from that. Kind of a sobering quote next. I didn't go to religion to make me happy. I always knew that a bottle of port, what's port, wine or a whiskey or something like that, would do that. If you want a religion to make you feel really comfortable, I certainly don't recommend Christianity. Pretty potent, right? If I want to be happy, I'll go get drunk. But if I want, I wouldn't recommend Christianity because it's not easy. And what are we all about right now in life? So there's a whole other argument from evolutionary psychologists that say we've never had it more easy. We've never had so many resources. We've never lived in such an abundance culture. We've never been able to get as much as we want, as often as we can. Right? Many of us are just a few minutes from any number of massive food sources or any vice that we want, cigarettes or alcohol or anything we want. We're minutes away from that. Throw in the internet, we're even that much closer. Yet, research continues to show that we're moving further and further and further away from happiness. So, what is causing that? We should be able to walk in. We're going to do a field trip. We're going to walk into Walmart. Sydney, what's the closest Walmart? Probably Sydney? Salina. Okay. We're going to go and walk into Walmart in Salina. We're just going to sit there and make observations. Now, a big group of us like this, we might get some weird people looking at us. But let's say we were able to do that individually. What we should see from an evolutionary point of view is people walking through Walmart with their hands up, rejoicing. We just made it. We made it to heaven. I've got food, fresh fruit that is grown on the other side of the world. I've got communication. I've got anything I want in one building. Has anybody been in Walmart lately? Do people look real happy in Walmart? If you want to be depressed, go in Walmart and just watch people. Right? They're in their pajamas, not everybody. Pajama pants in Sydney at least. And they're trudging through the aisles. If they got kids, they're screaming at their kids, yanking them around. What the heck is going on? What a miserable place. But what that shows, no knock on Walmart, but you can go to Meijer too, whatever you want. But any place, the more abundant, the more easy we have it in life, seemingly the more unhappy we are. It's weird, isn't it? Really weird. Yeah, we asked the question, why can't our Catholic faith be easier? Right? Well, that's sort of the purpose. It's not always easy. But if we have free will, then we have to be sort of judged on that. That goes down a theological rant that I'm not qualified to talk about. Okay? So, I made the distinction between achievement and fulfillment. Modernity convinces us if you achieve it, you're fulfilled. There's also some key distinctions. This is, Matthew Kelly talks about this, but Fulton Sheen talks about this too. And Fulton Sheen adds another layer. So I always like to look at the difference between pleasure and happiness. The big difference being pleasure is not sustainable. It's not enduring. So a Wendy's triple cheeseburger, junior bacon cheeseburgers are always my favorite. I don't eat them as much anymore. They give me pleasure, right? They don't make me happy, right? I don't leave there with a big smile on my face after I just ate 6 of them in less than 10 minutes. And with a big smile on my face saying, wow, I've never been more happy. I've felt pleasure, right? Happiness is enduring. Pleasure is not. Fulton Sheen says, transcending that even more. So pleasure is a selfish motive. It's only benefiting me. Happiness is a communal thing. I'd be happy when I'm in a deep, meaningful relationship. Fulton Sheen says, true joy is the connection to the divine, to God. Okay? So me, pleasure, get all that I want, but I'm not happy. Happiness is connection with others, but it's not. But only true joy is that connection with the divine. So, but again, what is pulling us away from our connection with divine? And that's where we get kind of scary. So, a few more. I don't know where we're at. 8, 9, 10. It would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased. Okay? So easy to us to fall into the trap of pleasure. And again, the connection with the divine helps us transcend that. The internet, technology, all of those things. Seek me, seek me, seek me. I think that if God forgives us, we must forgive ourselves. Otherwise, it's almost like setting up ourselves as a higher tribunal than Him. Another fascinating thing, especially if we look at politics and we look at pop news, is, man, we're not a very forgiving society, right? Everyone's heard of cancel culture by now. Is that a very forgiving society that says, I'm going to find a tweet that you sent 11 years ago when you were 19, I'm going to blast it all over the internet and tell everyone how rotten of a person you are? Right? So we're not forgiving at all. And technology now allows us to hold on to that, and it wants to make connections that what we wrote 11 years ago on a tweet, or 10 years ago, or 9 years ago, is who we are right now. Right? We're constantly being changed. We're constantly being modified and adapted, and so we have to be able to forgive too. C.S. Lewis, throughout his writings, points out the importance of forgiveness as well. This would be, 11, 12. 2, what will you look for help if you will not look to that which is stronger than yourself? Where do we look for help? Where do we look for happiness? Where do we look for that satisfaction, for that joy? Where do we look every day throughout the course of our day for meaning? Right? Do we have a tendency to turn to things that we shouldn't be turning to? Right? Do we look at artificial things? One of my favorite sayings about technology is, technology, we could say the internet, whatever form you like, technology is a wonderful servant but a terrible master. How many of us, or people we know, are servants to technology? Technology is our master. Or modernity is our master. It doesn't have to be all about technology. Another not so great thing about modernity is the old rat race. The rat race of, let's get a job, let's make so much money, let's buy just enough things so our money pays off those monthly payments every day, and let's keep doing it day after day. That's also another vice. Keeps us in this rat race, right? To what will you look for help if you do not look at that which, if we don't turn to God for help, then who are we looking to for help? Okay, a few more. Progress means, this is an interesting one, this got me thinking, so I'll pause after this. Progress means getting nearer to the place you want to be. When we progress means getting nearer to the place you want to be. And if you've taken a wrong turning, then go forward doesn't get you any nearer. If you're on the wrong road, progress means doing an about turn and walking back to the right road. And in that case, the man who turns back soonest is the most progressive man. Okay? So let's apply that in 2021. We're all going down this road. I think history is going to tell us 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 500 years from now, if we last that long, that everything, we took a left turn in Albuquerque. We had a deflection point 20 years ago when technology boomed, we started changing communication and relationships, all these things, the way we talk, the way we get news, on and on and on, everything I've been talking about. History's going to look back and be like, oh man, that's when everything changed. That's when it got real weird, okay? So Lewis, in a wonderful sort of prognostication, said progress might actually be turning away from that stuff, right? Going back to the human connection, going back to the divine connection, going back to what we're built and designed to do as human beings, right? And so I've been way too politicized since last election. And so you think of the progressives. No knock on progressives if you identify as one. But if you think of progressives that are, usually more liberal, you think about that's their intention. Let's keep moving forward. Let's progress. Let's progress. Lewis, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, is saying, no, that's not progress, because you might be going the wrong way. Right? So sometimes we have to go back to the beginning. Anybody just watched it again? The Princess Bride, the movie The Princess Bride. You guys are probably, if you do love it, you're probably a devotee. If you're not, you probably never heard of it before. But Andre the Giant, Fezzik. Fezzik? Yeah, Inigo. Fezzik, Inigo is Inigo. Inigo is the drunken Spaniard. And he said, his line was, Vizzini always told me to go back to the beginning. So Inigo wasn't known for his intellectual prowess. That was Vizzini. But anyway, it's a great movie if you ever get a chance to watch it. Go back to the beginning. Okay, probably one of my favorite quotes, and I'll be finishing up in a second, is, we live, in fact, in a world starved for solitude, silence, and private, and therefore starved for meditation and true friendship. This is 60 years ago. What if he was in today? We live in a world starved for solitude, silence, and privacy. Right? Again, going back to that quote. What are we doing when we're private, when we're alone, when we're faced with silence? Right? What do we do when we're bored? What are we not doing when we're engaging with technology? Okay, we're going other places. We don't stop anymore and just exist. We don't just be in the moment. You got to try to do that. So it's been really hip in psychological world the last several years. This world of intentionality and mindfulness and being present. I try to do it. I'm not very good. But before the talk, if you think you could go back, 140 years, when this was an old convent, and just be in that moment and be in that energy and have that feel of imagine the sisters walking out for their daily chores. I don't know if that was an original pump, or well, it probably was. Going out and pumping the water. Studies have been shown on happiness that the more advanced or the more modern a culture is, the less happy they are. So there's a great, I think it's still on Netflix. Oh, now I'm going to forget what it was. Life on the Taiga. So studies have looked at cultures all across the world, and they're quantitatively, the society that reported themselves as being the happiest were societies that were closest to the very egalitarian, self-sufficient type. So Taiga is a region in Siberia, and there's these hunter-gatherers. Yet on happiness charts, they're off the charts in happiness because it's simple. That's their life. They don't have all these distractions. Okay? It's so easy to avoid quiet and reflection and silence. We get really uncomfortable with it. In one of the classes I teach, called Techniques of Counseling, one of the first things that I have my students do is sit across from someone and don't say a word. Just sit there. Just sit there. Look at each other. Right? How uncomfortable is that? We're so dang uncomfortable with silence. We have to do things. So that's what we have to transcend. And then lastly, affection is responsible for 9/10 of whatever solid and endurable happiness there is in our lives. So again, studies show that as we advance in technology, we're getting more and more and more distant from each other. So technology has been really good in finding opportunities to meet people with online dating. We can maintain relationships over thousands of miles, but we're missing that human connection. So for many of you over the last several months, have done a lot of Zooming. This new phenomenon called Zoom fatigue. Has anybody heard of it? So Zoom fatigue is when we're Zooming too much. We feel blah. I used to teach 2 or 3 classes. I'd have 2 or 3 meetings online. I'd have 6, 8, 7, 10 hours of Zooming in front of a screen, and I'd come home and engage with the kids and my wife, and I'd be drained. And that's Zoom fatigue. And so somewhere the lizard brain is saying, okay, you see this person and you hear this person, but you don't feel this person. There's no connection. There's no affection. There's no affect. Affect is sensing how someone is communicating to you. Okay, we're missing that now more than ever. So we need affection and connection with people. We're getting less of that because of technology. So we have to come back together. There's this fascinating research back in the early 1900s of this primate, a monkey. And they took this monkey and they put it in a cage, and they threw in a bunch of stresses, a bunch of loud noises and banging and lights flashing and stuff like that. And then they hooked it up to a lot of monitors that measured stress responses, stress hormones. And they put the monkey in there and they did this, and they got a very high reading. They did the exact same thing with the exact same monkey that caused significant reductions in their stress response. They inserted one additional variable into that cage that changed everything. What do you think that was? Another monkey. Monkey's friend. Okay, so they sat beside each other. I think they grabbed each other. Same craziness went on, but they didn't get nearly as stressed. Okay, so we're moving further apart, but we have to come closer together. So, in conclusion, when you stop and think about this stuff, you sort of see it everywhere. Or maybe, again, it was Providence. But the gospel reading today at church was Jesus was out asleep on the fishing boat, and the sea was chaotic. So they woke him up. And what's the first thing Jesus said? And as I was thinking about this, I obsess a little bit about talks. So it's on my mind a lot, and I keep my notebook with me. And so the sea for today, in today's times, is modernity. It's the internet, it's technology, it's all the stuff, it's our phones. It's creating chaos and stress and turmoil in our lives. Right? What did Jesus say when he woke up to the sea? 3 words. Quiet. Be still. Okay? Just quiet. Be still. The sea listened to him. But if our sea is the chaos in our life, we can say that. We can say quiet. Be still. C.S. Lewis echoes the same things. He compels us to sort of transcend these things, to distance ourselves from the things that take us away from our divinity. To moderate technology, we can't get away from it. We're allowed to use it. We have to moderate it. But I said, we're the masters. It's not a master to us. He's telling us to be mindful, to be present, to be intentional, to be still. And then, very last quote, out of ourselves and into Christ we must go. Out of ourselves and into Christ. Okay. If anybody has any comments or thoughts or questions or wants to continue the discussion, I'll be happy to. I think that's... Yes?
Well,
couple.
when you mentioned how looking down at a phone is causing the curvature of the neck, it made me think...
You're having a certain pain in your neck recently?
No,
worried about?
No.
Okay,
It made me think of like devil's advocate, like looking at a book causes you to do the same thing. But then I got to thinking, well, usually most people after having read a book, then like they're just, I don't know, you're able to sleep better or actually like be a lot more inspired.
Yeah, so what...
Usually.
That's a great question. So what might be another difference? So how are we feeling when we're reading a book? When we're enjoying a book that we're reading?
Probably a lot more relaxed and focused.
Yeah, relaxed, happy, enjoying it, chilled out. How are we feeling when we're maybe looking at our phone or looking at things that we might be more tense, we might be agitated, we might be worked up? Maybe that's a difference. But you're right, although I don't think too many people are reading 8, 6, 8, 10, 12 hours a day either. I hope you are. I hope that's a good problem to have. Thank you. Yes?
Yeah, so I was just curious, like, your thoughts on this. You know, our culture kind of tells us, like, if this circumstance is met or this is was just curious, like, what you think about all of that, like, like just the thought of a utopia, like, because our culture does tell us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're wonderful. The news is wonderful. Media is wonderful. Technology is wonderful at telling us what we want to hear. And the ultimate purchase, the ultimate buy, the ultimate get is utopia, right? This fantasy world, this happiness and satisfaction. It can't come from any place but this latest product or this political ideology. So they're so some of the best, this is scary, some of the best social psychologists coming out of the best schools in the world, some of the best marketing practitioners, marketing people, marketing specialists, marketing researchers. 30 years ago, they used to be hired by Anheuser-Busch. Now they're being hired by who? They're being hired by Facebook and Google and all the big tech. So yeah, they're creating a narrative that this is where happiness comes from. I think it's bogus. That's what we have to transcend. Yeah, good point. Any other thoughts?
So, like, you kind of realize what's happening with this a little bit. Why do we keep buying follow this?
Great question. Yeah. Two things. One, going back to what I said, these devices are being built and designed to tap into our very human nature, our very DNA, our very instinct, that lizard brain that wants to constantly go back to it for satisfaction. And then I think the ultimate answer of why is I think there's diabolical forces at hand. I think there are forces that are feeding into that are hijacking our very human nature. And it's so hard to stay away from it because we're surrounded by it. Yeah, great question. I wish I had that answer. There's a bunch of different reasons. Yeah.
So let's say, like, I'm somebody, like, let's say, for example, like, I'm somebody that has been constantly distracted by technology for a very long time. And now, just recently, I have found ways to mitigate it and maybe get rid of, like, negativity and get out of it. Now, in this silence, I don't know what to do. Do you have any recommendations of what to try, because you never...
Great. It's a great position to be in. Okay. So we have human nature to go back to turn to that. Like Lewis says, we can go back. So reading and writing is the antidote for so many things. So reading the good stuff. Okay? Fiction, nonfiction, anything that could take us away. Writing and journaling. If I give a self-help talk, I give that a lot. And at the heart of that is I teach people how to journal, how to write things out. So reading and writing. Another thing is again, do what we're built and designed to do, physical activity. A hobby would be great. Building things, making things, growing things can tap into that instinctual abundance or that fulfillment that we have. Working out, running, walking, and things like that can make us feel like we're getting things done. Those are the big ones, but I would start with reading and writing. Reading the good books, and then writing things out. Journaling, if you've never tried it, it's a gift from God, because we can talk to God. Great question. I'm glad. I hope that is you. Hope you're in that situation, and that's a challenge to find things to replace it. Yes.
What are your views on, or like why people have FOMO or fear of missing out, especially on social media?
Yep. Yeah. Great. So FOMO, fear of missing out. If you don't know, it's a not a symptom. It's caused by social media. Is it Snapchat? Who actually, in all their geniusness, decided if you're following? I think it's Snapchat. You can see where your friends are. So I was seeing a teenage client a few years ago, and she was right in the middle of the social circles, and there's correspondence and said, we're not doing anything tonight, nothing's going on, it's a boring night, and she sees that all of her friends are at a house, and she's not there. So that's just a classic illustration of FOMO, or fear of missing out. Actually, they're missing out. Yeah, it's hijacking our lizard brain. It's built into our DNA to be social creatures and to be a part of what we know about, right? So, but the problem is that now we know about everything, right? A few months ago, I was laying in bed. It was about 10:30. I was trying to get to bed. I was just falling asleep, and my wife, even though she said she's not going to, will be looking through Facebook, and she wakes me up. She says, "Oh no!" So I started. What happened? Well, so and so's. So it was actually her coworker's daughter's mother-in-law. Coworker's daughter's mother-in-law, yes, was diagnosed with some disease, some illness. And I was like, oh, that's sad. Where does she live? She says, I think she's in Seattle. So the question is, why do we know what's going on with everyone else at 10:30 at night? Why do we know all the things we're missing out on? Because technology is compelling us to know that. So I think it's hijacking our desire to be in the know, our pursuit for knowledge. We want to be a part of those things. But that's where, again, technology is aware of what we're built and designed to do, like what we want to do, but it just takes advantage of it. So we want to know, be in the know, but not all the time, which we do, unfortunately, in many ways. Good question. Fear of missing out. I love that one. Yes, sir.
I got a question for you. Kind of bouncing off of that, like, I guess it would be like curiosity at the big motivator for why people continue to go back to YouTube or Facebook or whatever. How would you, I guess, like, put in that curiosity, which, in a lot of ways can be very good.
Sure.
For seeking knowledge, but can distract us from all these curiosities.
Yep. Awesome question. So how do we moderate, right? How do we satisfy certain human instincts like a natural curiosity, information gathering, increases in knowledge? I think we have to, and I try to teach this to some people, is we have to create filters, like certain filter questions. Like we're looking at something and ask ourselves the question, how does this benefit me? Or does it benefit me? So I'll go down the Wikipedia rabbit hole. So I'll start thinking about, I'll read a Wikipedia article about C.S. Lewis. I always start there. And then it has a link to Aldous Huxley, who is a contemporary too. And who's Aldous? I didn't even know, and I read some quotes, and then I'll go here and here. So at some point in time, we have to say, how is the information benefiting me? And we have to be able to sort of check a box. Is it making me healthier, happier, more meaningful, more satisfied, more fulfilled, more deeper in my relationship with God? A. B, is it neutral? Is it just a okay waste of time, which I'm all right with because it can be relaxing? Or is it none of the above? Is it taking me away from that? Right? And so a filter question would be A, B, or C. Is it bringing me closer to God? Is it God neutral, or is it anti-God? That would be one way. So and you can design your own filter questions with anything that you do that pulls you into a place that it's hard to moderate. Yeah, good question. Nick.
I don't know if this is so much of a question as much as it is like a comment. I think we've kind of been like bouncing around this a little bit too, but like, and I think I kind of know where we're going to kind of go with this, but I guess if you're going to try to put like an answer to like technology, I definitely would classify it as being used for evil more than good a lot. But at the same token, I don't really feel that it's probably going to see a lot of reduction in use at this point. More than anything, I kind of see it's just going to increase in use.
It's never going to slow down.
Right.
Unless we get hit by a meteor.
Yes. But I guess my school of thought there, I think, it's pretty much just kind of what you just touched on. I think the biggest way that we can kind of try to use that to kind of progress ourselves is to try to filter kind of and classify whether or not we are using information in ways that we want to. And whether it's going to be like beneficial or not. I definitely think there is quite a bit of benefit to technology because we pretty much have the answer to any question or almost any question at our fingertips. It's just whether or not we're using it kind of in a beneficial sort of sense there. So what would kind of be your thoughts if you were to try to say like, I don't want to put you on the spot and say like a game plan for this kind of thing, but like, would you say that your biggest sort of mindset for where we kind of need to go as a race is just kind of learning to kind of filter the information that we're kind of given?
I think A lot of it depends, but I think the ultimate answer is moderation. Yeah, we've passed Occam's razor. I mean, we've moved into the world. It's not going to stop.
Right.
Again, unless something cataclysmic happens, it's only going. So there's this thing called Moore's Law. Moore's Law is scary. So Moore's Law has been, it looked at computational power since the 1950s. And every 2 years, the computational power, I think, doubles of a computer. Literally, a chip, from the room, a computer the size of a room to have, our phone having exponentially more power than that. So Moore's Law has been consistent over the last 70 years. If that continues, nothing's going to stop it. So the only choice we have is to find ways to moderate it.
Yeah.
So now that has to be a plan. It can't just be, I got to stop looking at my phone less. Right?
Yeah.
It's not going to work real good. It's got to be, okay, I cannot, will not. One of the best things about iPhones, which I'm surprised they even do it, and there's got to be some, I haven't figured out what their reverse psychology is on this, but by looking at how much we're on, how much screen time,
Yeah.
we got to set limits. Okay, social media, I'm only going to do half-hour a day. Netflix movies, whatever we are big consumers, we have to come up while we're in a good place, thinking, calm, logical, healthy. We come up with those standards, and then we have to stick with it.
Yeah. Yep.
It's hard because, again, COVID has us more hooked on technology, more deep in that relationship, and it's only going to be up to us. You can also have accountability partners there too, right? So, hey, we share a vision, we share similar outlooks on things. Guys, gals, how much are we going to look at technology this week? What's our goal? And talk about it,
Yeah.
right? What was so hard? Yeah, I was sad. I was depressed. My grandma was sick, so I had to talk. I talked to mom and I texted for hours and hours. I mean, things come up, but we have to set those limits.
Yeah. So you think kind of just as a general sense the best way to go ahead and kind of handle moving forward in the future? Because, I mean, again, I don't think that's going to change towards us going back to not using technology at all in any sense. But I think definitely moderation is probably the way to go.
There's no other option.
Yeah, that's okay. Yep.
I mean, unless you want to be a monk and live in a cave somewhere on what's the island in Greece. But yeah, it's really hard.
Yep.
We live in this world. We're here. We're connected to it. We have no choice but to moderate it. Yes?
If a person is going to try journaling, what would a person write about?
Good question, man. Give you a business card. No. Lots of different ways. So there's different types of journaling, and I could talk for an hour about journaling. But 3 different types. One is free association journaling, meaning just sit down and write about anything you think, anything that comes to your mind, allowing your subconscious to dictate what you write. There's also lots and lots of journal prompts. So on the internet, there's even Catholic journal prompts. And so it'll give something like, I feel closest to God when, and then you just write about that. And then the other one is, it's not I say journaling. I have a planner. Again, it's with me all the time. It's a page a day, and it's lists, it's to-do things, it's quotes, it's thoughts, it's reminders. It's a little bit of everything. So it's a collection of stuff. Find what works for you. But first step in writing in a journal is get a journal. Okay, 2, have it with you. Okay, 3, spend about 5, 10, 15 minutes in the morning and about 5, 10, 15 minutes at night writing it. Okay, 15, 20 minutes max. You can get through it and just see what comes to mind. Okay, see where you go. See where your thought takes you. See where God takes you. Okay, awesome question. Any other thoughts? Yes?
Can you elaborate more about the mud pies and the Halloween?
I think he was saying the mud pies. I think he was saying that, and so I would say that he was equating that with all the crap that's on the internet. Bunch of mud. If we get into chat rooms or chat groups or political stuff or Reddit, whatever's, that's just slinging mud. It's artificial weapon. That's what mud is. You throw some mud at, you're not going to kill them. You're going to make them mad, and they're going to sling more mud back at you. Right? And that's what so much of the internet does, is it creates these protective ways of like bashing or dumping or being evil against someone and them slinging it back to you, all in this artificial world. without actually any real life consequences. I think that's what he's meaning. He was very prophetic in many ways and anticipating possibly what was to come. Okay, a quick shameless plug. If two things. If you want to hear any more of my rambling thoughts, there's opportunities that are coming up. I'll describe. If nothing else, it'll tell you what not to do in the future, as if you don't want to hear anything more from me. But Mark Travis and myself and a few other people got together to create Summit Catholic Institute. Mark has told you about it or not, but it's starting with classes in August, and there's I think a 2-year program if you want. It's myself and Father Nathan Cromley and Luke Slonkowski from Minster, who has a background in theology and the classics literature. So mine is going to be on elements of this. We're going to do deep dives into maintaining mental health and wellness in lieu of modern times. So we're going to talk about self-care and wellness and holistic health, the 6 dimensions of health and all this kind of stuff that I'm really excited to talk about. So it's going to be on Thursday nights starting in August. I'll teach one class a week, and the next week it'll be Luke, next week it'll be Father Nathan Cromley. And they're going to offer certificates, and we're hoping to grow and develop this into a legit sort of alternative or additional educational environment for people who are either going to school somewhere else, or who are working, or who want to do both. So it is called Summit Catholic Institute. There's brochures over on the table. Yes, with more information. There will be scholarship. There is a fee with that, but there will be scholarships. Money should not. Mark sent me a text saying, make sure money is not a factor in stopping someone from going. Yes?
Will there be a lot of additional homework?
Oh, it's going to be terrible. Yeah, I love research papers. So I hope you're all familiar with APA style. It's a technical writing style. Yeah, 10 to 15 pages a week. No homework, at least not in my class.
Okay.
It's just discussion and reflection and stuff like that. Good question. Okay, thank you all. Have a great night.
I think two main general takeaways that I had. One being just being aware of the ways we're spending our free time, and searching for things to fill that time that are stimulating spiritually and intellectually. And then another thing being inviting other people into that time, because I guess as humans we're meant to be with other people. So yeah, we're gonna take a 5-minute break.
You could have saved me. You could save these guys about an hour at a time. You just could have said that. Got it right? I'm just kidding.
We're gonna take a 5-minute break, and then we'll have another speaker for about 10 minutes.
Okay. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you.
I'm gonna go to the restroom. We shall see.
I don't know.
That was.
Grab water every now.
Overweight.